on the show today, Stella Eisenstein. Hope I got that right. So Stella is author, intuitive bodyworker, has a background in acupuncture. I just talking about changing her name and all sorts of other things. So Stella, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, you're in the United States.
I am little state in the union, little roadie.
Tell us how you got there. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, I grew up here. My dad is from Colombia and my mom is from the South, but one thing led to another and they ended up in Rhode Island. And my mother always used to say, I can't believe I'm raising Yankee children. But but here we are. And I've moved. I used to be a travel writer. I've moved around a ton. I used to live in New York City and work for magazines there. And then I moved to Los Angeles and did some little bit of screenwriting there. And then I moved to Santa Fe and opened my private practice because I'd also gotten my acupuncture degree in Los Angeles when I was there. And then opened a private practice in Santa Fe and kept just learning as much as I could about how to help people heal physically. My dad was a doctor, so was my grandfather. So there was this really long, kind of lifelong sense that I really should be helping people more tangibly than I had been doing as a travel writer. That was what spurred that shift. And then at some point I got divorced and remarried to Charles Eisenstein. I understand you didn't, most people kind of, that's my calling card, but
I had no idea you got. I've adored Charles. I've had him on the show a couple of times. I remember during the embodiment conference, I did a late night session with him and had a nice connection with him. And I've always liked his writing. I get his newsletter, and I actually had no idea that you guys were connected. Someone else recommended you, and so
yeah.
that was a nice surprise when I was like, "Oh, I know someone else with your surname."
Yes, I joined him in Pennsylvania for a while, and then when our son got to school age, we have an 11-year-old now. He's homeschooled, but when he got to school age, we moved to be closer to my brother, who is here in Rhode Island still. And we have a cousin. My son has a cousin that's exactly his age, right around the corner now. So that's why we're here.
And what do you do now? Tell us. I mean, obviously, I've been researching you, I've been listening to other interviews and things, but yeah, well, tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I trained as as I said, I used to be a travel writer and I've done a ton of writing, but then I trained as an acupuncturist and really leaned into private practice just because I loved it. I loved working with people. I loved hearing their stories and getting really intimately into the details of their lives. And like one joke acupuncturists say is no other profession can you really ask about people's poop as much as you can in acupuncture. So
Yeah, I was surprised when when I first went to alternative health people, they started asking about my poop. I just
we're very
remember
interested.
that.
Yeah, we're
What,
very
what?
dad actually just recently passed and we spent the last 10 months basically talking about his poop. Yeah. So uh, so I got into private practice, learned all these other modalities, learned depth hypnosis, learned ortho-bionomy, and 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 really just started to like ask, what is healing? What is going on here? Because some of these modalities, ortho-bionomy, integrative manual therapy, depth hypnosis, are quite magical and seem very miraculous. And so I just got super curious trying to figure out the heck was going on here because, I would go to these healers and they would resolve trauma in my physical issues going on in my body. Um, you know, and they would resolve them without even touching me sometimes. Sometimes they would be touching me, but often they wouldn't, but they would be able to kind of manipulate the field somehow to release trauma from my physical body. And I had a lot of physical issues growing up. I just wasn't a very healthy kid. I was sick from like November through February every single year, and I had scoliosis by the time I was 16. I had chronic disease when I was in my 20s, and with these alternative modalities, I've been able to reverse so much of it. And it just seems so miraculous. So that's really where I've spent the last 15, 20 years is really delving into the question of like, why do these things work? And now offer, mostly offer classes in teaching people how to kind of hack their parasympathetic nervous system to get their body to heal with more alacrity, with more speed, and then resolve some of these issues that Western medicine really doesn't go anywhere near.
Well,
Um,
let's go straight into that then. Like why does healing work when it works? I'd say sort of skeptical, but with some open-minded. I've done different modalities. I've definitely tried acupuncture, for example, and got some benefit from that. Not long ago actually. I've tried a few kookier sort of no-touch things at distance just to go, you know what, I'll give it a try. I've been desperate at certain points in my life, and I've also seen sort of, despite some skepticism, I've also seen some unusual things happen that I thought, wow, that's kind of surprising. Yeah, why does whatever works work?
so I can give you the short answer and then I can go back and tell you kind of what my process was in coming to this. So the short answer is that attention plus allowance is the root of all healing, is the principle behind all healing. So if you take consciousness to be the prima materia, then you understand that attention is actually all we have to give each other. Now we are embodied and we have physical experiences of this that are quite uh, catching. We really live, especially in our culture, in the reality of our physical bodies. Um, but but if you but all the ways that we pay attention to each other, some of them are physical and some of them are different kinds of attention, right? Like we can pay attention in our emotional body, we can pay attention, with our mental body, and we can touch each other. That would be physical attention. Um, no matter how you look at it, it's a form of attention that we're giving each other when we heal. So you can even say placebo. When you give somebody a placebo pill, you can call that a form of attention, right? Like you've applied something, a form of attention. And if you get out of the way when you do that, in other words, if you trust or if you um, relax and let it happen to you, it will heal. And that has to do with um, getting the specific frequency right of that attention. So if it's a placebo, and that's the specific frequency of attention that is needed to meet the trauma embedded in the tissues of that person, then they will heal. If it's a homeopathic remedy, that frequency, if it's correct, will meet the specific trauma embedded in the tissues.
So
And
what do you mean frequency? I tend to find that's one of those sort of slightly pseudosciencey words when people say the frequency of something, they're using a term from physics, but do you mean it? How do you mean that word?
as witness mostly. So, uh, and the best way actually to go about this is to show you what I mean, if you'll play along.
I'll play along. Why not?
All
Seem
right.
like a nice lady, if nothing else. I'll give it a go. Uh,
All right. So let's say, or let's pick, um, let's just pick, we can pick a place in your body, or I can pick one for you. Um,
somewhere with trouble, somewhere with a injury.
yeah, a place that I would say one that you are secretly worried about.
Secretly worried. I've got one that have some concern with. Not sure it's secret, but maybe I'm denying the potential seriousness.
All right, so put your hand on that place. And then, so just put your attention there. So, and then you're going to sit behind yourself. So I mean that energetically, but a very quick way to get into that mode is to activate your peripheral vision. Just activate your peripheral vision. So you're paying attention, and now you're activating your peripheral vision. And something subtle starts to happen in your tissues. Little, little. Okay, so when you start to drop out of um, of that kind of just witnessing mode. Now, I think this gets into right brain, left brain. So you're when you're paying attention, you're activating your right brain. And when you allow, when you turn on your peripheral vision, you're activating your right brain simultaneously. And when you can do that, you'll notice, and it's subtle, it'll be subtle at first, and as you get more accustomed to it, you'll notice it better. And especially in the beginning when you're doing it, we have such a habit of living in our left brains and kind of like trying to figure out what's going on, that we fall out of that allowing mode very easily. We turn off our right brains almost de facto. We pay attention and we stay in allowing. We stay with that peripheral vision activated. And your body will just start to turn on its healing mode. It's just a way to hack the parasympathetic nervous system to get your body to heal in places where, there's an embedded trauma. There we go. Can you feel that?
No, I mean, it's pleasant. I certainly paying touch is always nice, and touching my own body I find pleasant. I find it quite tricky to hold the sort of peripheral vision and the attention, as you say. There's sort of two things.
How about your shoulder? Is there anything happening in there?
Not particularly, if I'm honest. Doesn't feel that much different than when I started. It's got an injury there that's potentially it's been hanging around a while, so I've been sort of increasingly concerned by it.
Let's just stay with it for one more minute. And let's shift down to the bursa. The connective tissue sac around the shoulder joint. And if we pay attention to the bursa, we're really picturing the bursa and whatever stiffness is there. And staying in that peripheral vision. To me, it feels like the bursa is getting a little stiffer. It's getting kind of tense. And that's good because the frequency of the stiffness of that bursa is getting matched. It's getting met. So we're just paying attention to that bursa and we're activating our peripheral vision and we're just letting the body do what it already knows how to do. There we go. And now it really starts moving in my sensing. There we go. And we can feel. There's a tighten up again. And then there's something in there that is there we go. Looks like it's relating to your neck. Like maybe what is that? C3. A little tension in the nerve. Paying attention there, and then it's gonna shift right there. And just move that shoulder around and see if it feels any different.
Yeah, maybe a little more relaxed. I mean, I've been touching it for a few minutes there.
So you're right. So
in the gym tomorrow, if it's really changed, that's not normally when I feel it the most.
Yeah. So these are not, so this is what I do. I pay attention to the tissues. I get out of the way. I activate the peripheral vision. I get the body's parasympathetic nervous system to turn on. I teach people how to do this. The changes are not always huge. It's not like best, bingo presto, you have a completely healed arm, but you have these small, you have this small augmentation often of healing in that shoulder joint or wherever. And those add up. So those add up over time. And sometimes you'll get bigger shifts, but often you just get this sort of micro repair of all it's like you're just saying to your body, hey, you have all this capacity to heal yourself, and let's put it to use where we want it to go. Because like let's just augment the capacity and move it to that shoulder so that we can um, get more range of motion, get more repair in that particular area. The reason we have to do this, because your body's always working to heal itself. And it is taking whatever you're, throwing at it and working all the time. But when trauma is lodged in the physical body, when it's somatized, it is forgotten. Part of what causes it to be somatized in the tissue is this need to not have it be front and center in your body's day-to-day functioning. So you have to, in order to heal these old injuries, you have to kind of hijack the body's capacity to heal and go back and get those areas, kind of recollect all those. So this whole kind of how do we age? Why do we age like this? We don't have to do that. We don't have to end up being this, baggy collection of old injuries by the time we're 40. We can actually resolve these old issues, and that's how I do it. That's what I talk about. It leads to a lot of really fascinating, a really different understanding about medicine and what medicine can be. But when we suddenly have this capacity to kind of go back and heal all our old things, and I encourage you to just keep up with it. And see what happens when you just hold attention in different parts of your body and activate your peripheral vision. It's such a low-hanging fruit. You can do it when you're asleep, before you go to bed at night. Just put your hands on your body, activate your peripheral vision, fall asleep, and your body will heal that area with just more focused, more oomph than it would otherwise give to that area.
It seems like we're in such sympathetic arousal most of the time in modern culture. I was running around on trains yesterday, going between cities, sort of plane the day before, surrounded by strangers. There's an intensity of pace, isn't there, to modern life? And I can't imagine that's good for any healing process.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's, and this is the antidote to it. It's like every day we wake up, from the time we roll to our sides and turn on our phone, right, to like every single second where we're stimulating our parasympathetic nervous systems, and that's the antithesis of healing. I mean, it's like why we maybe a big part of why we have such a chronic disease burden. We just never have time to go into rest and relax mode. And it's also quite crucial in situations like if you have a chronic disease like cancer, for instance, and you go to your doctors and they freak the shit out, they just like terrify you. Nothing could be worse for your healing.
Right, right. I mean, so I was wondering that, like, there's the injury, and then there's all the worry about the injury, and there was the illness and all the worry about the illness, and the atmosphere around illnesses is often very stressed. And I'm going for an eye test again in a couple of days, and I go to a hospital for it, and it's this very clinical environment where all the doctors and nurses look exhausted and overworked, so their nervous systems are all shot. Everyone's drinking large amounts of caffeine and alcohol just to get by. And I dislike going for this eye test I have to have every 2 months in the hospital. It's a fairly minor thing. They're just checking I haven't any degradation of my eyes. And because of that atmosphere, and every time I go there, I'm like, thank God I've not got anything seriously wrong with me. This is not a nice environment to be in.
Yeah, well, I think there's been a kind of a, yeah, I could tell some stories. A friend of mine recently had her husband in the hospital for kidney infection, and three nurses came up to her apropos of nothing and said, "Get him out of here. They're going to kill him." I mean, the state of our hospitals is really kind of alarming. I also have experience with this more recently with my dad. My dad was a doctor and started, was the first surgeon over at our local hospital, opening up the orthopedic clinic. And he expected that when he just died of pancreatic cancer. And when he expected to be treated well when he went into hospital. But yeah, they were shockingly incompetent. It was really devastating for him.
As someone who worked in that system.
Yeah, as a top of the food chain member of that
Uh,
system,
uh,
like even him,
even
even
him as someone who
even
was
didn't get,
a big
yeah,
on.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm
Anyway,
sorry for your loss as well. Let me just say that, just human to human interview.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we had a really beautiful. So I trained as an acupuncturist, and he wasn't happy about it. He really wanted me to become, you know, some kind of doctor like him, and but he came around when, just doing these little procedures on him at with pancreatic. He had 10 months of pain-free. Pancreatic cancer is supposed to be one of the most painful ways to go out, but we were able to kind of shepherd him out without any pain whatsoever. He took one Tylenol the entire time.
From the
With
acupuncture, from the
with this, just this kind of putting your hands on your body, sitting behind yourself, letting your body heal, because you can, okay, so we did a little 4-minute thing on your shoulder, and maybe you had a little bit of improvement, and you can attribute that to the warmth of your hand for sure. You can attribute that to the slight pressure from your hand, letting the gel inside the cells, turn into
Mm.
liquid, discharge, and uptake with more, you know, with more efficiency. Um, but but maybe, maybe also sitting behind yourself and activating your peripheral nervous system, or activating your, your peripheral vision, maybe that helped it even a little bit more. Well, once you start doing this as a practice, and your body really starts learning how, oh yeah, let's do that, let's heal, then you really can get a lot of traction, a lot of movement sometimes. So for instance, in his case, there was one day when he'd had a stent surgery, and they sent him, they were expecting that he probably wouldn't necessarily, it's hard to recover when you don't have a lot of resources. It's sort of hard to recover from that. And so one day he called me up. He was like, I'm in pain. So I went down there, and we just held attention. It felt to me like his liver was just really not moving. And so we just held attention on it. And I did not, on it. I said, Dad, we might have to go to the hospital. Um, but in fact, just doing that, just getting out of the way and letting your body heal, and just holding attention on his liver, it just helped his liver to move enough and get enough, it was just, we just directed the attention, and the body took over, and we started hearing it gurgle, little gurgles, okay, okay, little more gurgles, little more gurgles. And then it was like, wow, okay, let's keep going. And my dad was like, no, no, there's a little bit over here still, and so we just did it until there wasn't anything left. And I have no way of proving it, but I am pretty sure we kept him out of the hospital that day, and which would have killed him, because what would they have done? They would have had to go back in, and he didn't have the energy to go back in and do another surgery. So you know it, and this is accessible. This is your hands and your attention,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and your ability to calm down. So I really hope that people, I really am trying to get people to recognize that there's so much capacity just in their ability to turn on their parasympathetic nervous system. Like we can do so much toward healing if we can just apply these really simple tools. I think they should be taught in schools, you know.
And you call it resonant attention, is that right?
Well, resonant attention sort of, because when you get a little bit deeper into it, if you learn one of these bodywork modalities that are so specific, and you can, you can, sometimes different parts of the body need so for instance, okay, so we're saying we're going into the liver and we're noticing that there's a problem there that's very non-specific. But one fascinating feature of working in this way is that sometimes if you're just acknowledging to the field around you, the living field around you, that it's not just stagnation in the liver, but maybe it's blood stagnation in the liver. Sometimes that seems like it is the particular resonant attention that is needed to trigger the body's healing response. This all comes from, sorry about that. This all comes from a really basic, my process with all of this comes from learning positional release. It's a osteopathic technique, and most body workers learn it as kind of a first line thing where you go in and you shorten a muscle fiber. When you shorten muscles, they release. It's quite miraculous, it's like, but it's well known, doctor MDs learn about this. They just think, oh, who cares? It's just if you shorten muscle fibers, they happen to release, and it's because of the way the myosin fibers will, it's like you give them a little slack and they'll just, relax. It's some kind of reflex, they say. Well, when you learn body work, you go in and you learn that positional release. You learn how to shorten a muscle fiber and hold the two ends of it together, and then bingo presto. So this is in direct contradistinction to what the physical therapists do, where they try to stretch your, if your muscle fiber is really tight, they'll try to stretch it, in order to keep it limber. In fact, if you just shorten the muscle fibers, they'll completely relax and they'll be like butter. You don't have to stretch them all the time. If a muscle goes back to contraction after that kind of a release, it's because there's an underlying problem. So in a lot of cases with, PT work, if you're stretching against the body, then you're probably doing more damage. If you're able to use a softer approach and it's still tension, then there's something you haven't met. And so sometimes it'll be like a tear in a vessel. And you want that, your body is contracting around it, is splinting around it in order to protect itself. And we find that, yeah, actually the body works in its for its own benefit almost all the time. It's always working for your benefit. It's actually not something you need to fight. It's something you need to support. And anyway, so this positional release, once you learn that technique, you then go on and you try to apply it in other ways. Well, what happens if you apply it to tendon? Hold tension, kind of give it a little slack. Can you get the tendon to release? Well, as a matter of fact, you can get that, body workers are learning this technique all the time. They're just not thinking about it in terms of attention allowance or a connected field. But we find, yeah, tension. So what happens if you hold it in bone? Can bone heal? I mean, I have stories of bone, holding attention in the bone, and it just cracks back into place. It's quite amazing. Friend of mine's daughter fell down the stairs, and she came up with her arm dangling. and she put her hands around it and did, she was using a different one of these, kind of combination of kind of myofascial and planar kind of movements that body workers learn. But the next day she went in and the doctor looked at the x-ray and presumed, he said, wait, so she broke her wrist 6 weeks ago. Like bone can actually heal that quickly too. And this is not common knowledge, but we see it happening all the time. It's just a little bit under the radar, a lot under the radar.
Mm. I'm still curious about, you said just before we hit record about changing your name, and there was I didn't quite get the full story there, and it's still itching. So are you happy to share that story?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I grew up as a writer. I worked in magazines in New York City, worked for Condé Nast. And then at the end of my 20s, I was sort of feeling frustrated that I wasn't helping people more directly. And so I went to acupuncture school, kind of dropped out. I went to acupuncture school thinking that I would get that degree and then just go back and work for magazines. Um, and then the whole magazine world changed and it wasn't really possible to do kind of what I envisioned. And I got more deeply into healthcare. Um, but I was still an artist at heart, like that was kind of I just thought of myself as a writer. And so as a side project, I started I decided I was going to change my name. It was just a stunt originally. And then come to find out, uh, when you enter a spiritual community, very often they'll give you a new name, and they do that to help you see around the confines of your ego. So I had an experience like that, and I talk about it in this book I wrote. It was published by North Atlantic Books in 2012. It was called Star Sister: How I Changed My Name, Grew Wings, and Learned to Trust Intuition. And I was also meditating at the time. So the growing wings thing was just from a funny experience I had with that, with meditating. But the name change thing. So I was just sitting in my chair meditating one day. I was quite upset with my husband. My husband didn't want to have a baby. And I was really struggling with it. And just sitting in a chair contemplating one day. And I had a mini samadhi experience. I wouldn't say it was a full-blown one. But I just had this realization that I really was not, that the story of my name was a very limited version of who I was. And so it's covered in that book. My original name was Laura Chamorro, and and then I changed it again. The book covers it all. It was all this. It was like this whole miraculous unfolding of fun and weird experiences that I had that I tell the full version of in that book. It's actually out of print now. It just went out of print. Um, and I'll probably put it back up on Amazon at some point, but they're more expensive than they used to be because of that. So you can still find copies, um, but yeah, it's not. Yeah. Have you
And
thought about changing your name? A lot of people have. I get lots of emails from people saying that, oh yeah, I changed my name too. La la la.
I've had got a bunch of Buddhist friends who have changed their name, and I've heard their stories about the sort of ups and downs. And that's quite common in the Trirathlon order, which is quite big in the UK. And when I used to work with children, my name was Mr. Fluffy. So I'm known to 50,000 human beings as Mr. Fluffy, as Mark. So and in different countries, I've had different names. I'm Marco in Italy, where I've just been. And Marco is very sexy compared to Marek in Eastern Europe, who's very tough. So,
Yes.
I've had Marcos in Ethiopia, Maku in Japan. They all have different flavors. And so I'm not too attached to names. I think they're all just a bit of fun.
My nieces and nephews, some of my nieces and nephews call me Tia Lali. That's my preferred name. Tia Lali.
Yeah, Lally. What does that mean? It's
Lauda, it's just a shortened version of Laura.
beautiful, beautiful. And
Yeah.
what do you really enjoy doing these days? I mean, in terms of sharing this work, or what's really lighting you up?
I'm working, so I had a really embodied practice for a while. At first I was an acupuncturist, and then it was, hands-on with my with just this attention and allowing. And now I work mostly online with it. It's a little different than working with my hands on the body. Um, it's yeah, but I really enjoy it. So I'm doing that. And then I'm teaching people how to sit behind themselves, basically, or how to activate their peripheral vision and hold attention in their body. The trauma, the way trauma becomes somatized is really, there's like this forgetting component. So it's like we don't even remember all the things that might have really shifted our the way we hold our body. Um, so somebody might have an injury from when they were 11 that, you just compensated for. The body's so good at compensating. It's like, oh yeah, no problem. We can lose the functionality in that ankle. We can shift that down to 80%, no problem. You can get your shoulder can be hurting you and your neck a little bit out of alignment all the time. And what does it matter? But to go sometimes when you go back in and you resolve an old trauma stuck in the body from 20 years ago, it's the linchpin piece and a ton can shift back into place. So
It's amazing how we get used to things. A fun example of this, about a month ago, my chair collapsed on one side. So
yeah.
essentially, I'm side bending the entire time, and I'm gonna get. I was thinking this afternoon is probably the day I fix it, and so essentially, I've got a slight side bend, like it's kind of like that the whole time, because it's just a couple of inches lower on one side, and it's only been about a month, but I'm already to the point where it feels normal. Like it just feels completely normal that I'm in this slight side bend the entire time to straighten myself up. It's funny how we get used to things.
We're masters of compensation and it's great. You would not want to let go of that ability to compensate. It really makes the world possible for us. We can't always deal with we can't self-correct, in the moment all the time. It's okay to have a little shelf to put things on, occasionally. But then we forget that we have a shelf there, and that we could go back and regain all that functionality. We think we have this really weird belief in our culture that, oh, once it's broken, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. When in fact, you know, there's a lot you can do about it, and it can be quite easy to do.
What's your sense in terms of any thoughts on mental health? I've got very interested in the mental health for young people. I just bumped into my friend's niece walking. She must be 14 or something, walking down the street and just looking really down. And it's so common that I see young people whose mental health just isn't great. Yeah, any thoughts on the sort of psychological side of things? I mean, I guess it's, back to our context of stress and everything else.
Well, I think that mental issues express through the body in different ways. So one is sometimes but they also can become somatized. They don't always, but they certainly can become somatized. And I'll tell you a story about this. So recently I had I used to have scoliosis. I don't have it anymore. But it's still, I don't have the bulk of it anymore. It's still healing just a little bit now. And uh, I recently realized, wow, my diaphragm is really tense and it's just constantly in spasm. Why? And series of events, I finally was able to get down to my diaphragm and start paying attention to my diaphragm. And I'm feeling around in there and trying to figure out, what is this? What is this? And one of the modalities or one of the methods that I use for trying to figure out what these somatized traumas are is that I'll say, like, okay, is this in the mental body? Is this in the physical body? Is this in the belief system? Where is this coming from? And I was able to identify, oh, wow, this comes from 13 years old when my boyfriend was mean to me. And I developed a belief that I really, really believed, and I believed it so much that I just smashed it into my tissues and just let it live there for the last 40 years, 30, 40 years. And it was, I need to be thinner, or I'm not beautiful, or I am not desirable. And it tensed up my diaphragm, sort of a sucking in your belly kind of a response to the world, right? And just like locked in this belief, gotta suck in there, or gotta, I have to hold it. I'm not safe in the world because I'm not right. And so this is just a subconscious response that my body has via a belief to the world. And I'm expressing all the time. I'm all the time walking around with this tight tension in my diaphragm. Now, that was minor. Think about a Black person walking down the street, right? Like what their response to the world through their bodies might be, right? Or somebody who's been abused by their father, or somebody who's been, like, all kinds of trauma that we carry in our bodies. And now you're walking around with a tight diaphragm, or tight back muscles, or any kinds of response. Those are mental beliefs, but they create a somatic reality for us. That's really hard. That leads ultimately to chronic disease, right? Because what happens if your diaphragm is actually not functioning? You can't take a full breath. I used to sit in yoga class and be like, wow, people seem to be able to breathe through their belly. Like they seem to be able to expand their belly. Why can't I expand my belly? And I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And so, I just like, oh, maybe I just work differently. No, actually, I had this embedded trauma in my diaphragm. And when I was able to pay attention to it and bring softness and just witness, wow, that was hard for you at 13 to have that kind of response from somebody you held in esteem. So how do and then feel my diaphragm relax finally after 30 years. And then, oh my God, my lungs are functioning now. My belly can expand. I can breathe, like, I don't have sleep apnea anymore as a result of that. That's going to up my life expectancy by something like 5 years.
Big. Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's so many, I mean, it's just, and again, this is my little life. Like, this was nothing. And, I mean, it was meaningful to me, but in terms of the range of what traumas people experience out there, like, what are we holding in our bodies? What is a low-hanging fruit we can't get off the table, that in terms of like healing ourselves? There's so much. So, but there's tons of the other major um, um, expression of belief or mental health that one thing that I think is not very well understood at all is that we can have somatic responses to mental health issues that we try to treat, with drugs or pharmaceuticals or whatever, uh, but that are really rooted in mental health. So for instance, if you are in fight or flight all the time, if you're living in an environment that is dangerous and you're in stress mode all the time, that's going to kick your kidneys into action. You're going to be slightly hypoglycemic all the time, right? Because your kidneys are like, watch out, watch out, watch out. You're just, constantly monitoring the environment, constantly looking for danger signals, constantly looking for danger coming at you. So your body is always primed to respond. So it's always mobilizing sugar in order to jump into action when needed. So we talk about chronic disease and obesity, but we're not linking that. We're not recognizing that there's a mental health component. It's physical and mental, but there's like this embodied, like, and so maybe you'll, like, some people talk about it as, oh, you're adrenal dominant. They'll say like, it's just genetic. What I've found is that there's often a trauma. There's a somatized trauma. That's the root of that. That's that if you can resolve it,
Hmm.
um, it,
Hmm.
it will change your physiology.
Nice. Nice. We need to wrap up relatively soon. Stella, it's lovely to meet you. And
Right.
sorry again for your recent loss. It's interesting work. Certainly with you on the stuff around stress and how we're that can come from trauma, can come from a whole cultural milieu that we're in as well, and the power of attention. Where do people go to find out about you and your work?
Yeah, so they can go to www.resonantattention.com. That's RESONANT attention, ATTENTION. It's all given as one word. .com. I do classes and I do individual sessions a bit, but I'm much more geared toward that. And you can also find me on Substack, resonantattention.substack.com. I write mostly, if you just sign up for the free email there, you'll just get information about what I'm offering. If you become a subscriber, I show case studies, and I have another memoir that I wrote there about my own healing journey that really delves into this method and
Can I ask how you find Substack? I'm very likely going to start a Substack soon. Is it something you enjoy as a platform? I know some listeners know about it, some don't.
Substack. I find to be great. I mean, it sort of has all the functionality that I want, and people
Mm.
seem to be able to use it. The only thing is, if people, yeah, the only issue that I have is that when people want to sort of shift around their subscriptions, like it's not very clear if you're on Substack or you're on an individual site. People don't understand that there's this back end with Substack, but I think that might be just the over 40s. I don't think the youngers have so much of a problem with understanding the back end architecture of Substack. They're adding also a bunch of new features that I think are really, really great. But yeah, and you can sort of hack it in different ways. Like I don't really use it the way you're supposed to, but it works for me still. So um, I think it's where the cool kids hang out.
Well, the cool kids. Okay, I'll see you there shortly then. Stella, thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much.